Right, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, Antony Carpen here on probably day number 14 of this crazy lockdown period that we've got, but needs must. Now, what I'm going to try and do here is play with a new app on the old smartphone and use it to introduce a very influential book that actually shaped the history of Cambridge and also the surrounding villages, and it's this one. It's by William Robert Davidge and it's called the Cambridgeshire Regional Planning Report, which was commissioned by the two councils in order to basically set out what the rules would be for town planning in and around Cambridge. Now, what I'm going to try and do is to drop in individual snapshots of various pages of the book rather than kind of like holding them up like so, because I just want to see if it makes for a much better and a much smoother read. Now, you can see on the first map the area of the Constituent Authorities, and as you can see, back in those days it wasn't just Cambridge City Council and Cambridgeshire County Council. It was this Borough of Cambridge Council before Cambridge became a city in 1951, and it was surrounded by not just one South Cambridgeshire District Council as we have today, but a series of really tiny district authorities: Chesterton Rural District, Newmarket, Swavesey, Caxton and Arrington, Melbourne and Linton. What we had back in those days was much smaller constituent authorities, and those were all kind of like grouped together, Cambridge and South Cambs, into what was known as Cambridge County Council. So Isle of Ely was kind of separate, Huntingdonshire was separate, the Soak of Peterborough was separate, and so on and so forth. So one of the first things that we realise is actually the setup that we've had for the current setup that we have for city districts and county council is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively recent phenomenon. Mid-1970s was when we got the setup that we currently have, minus Peterborough, which became a unitary, I think, in the 1990s. But the point being is that these things can be changed. It's just that there hasn't been the political will. The one political figure that I'm going to mention in this book is Dr. Alex Wood of the Cambridge Labour Party. He was the chair of the planning committee for the Borough of Cambridge, and as a result he was a chair of a series of committees all about roads, zoning, development, coordination, and ultimately the preparation of the report. Now, I've done some screenshots of the contents pages. The reason why I've done that is I just want people to get a feel for what this regional planning report was really trying to deal with, and actually how some of them we kind of forget actually how important they are today. The one thing that's really a big deal now during the lockdown is access to open spaces. Now, one of the reasons why we have a number of open spaces here in and around Cambridge is because this report actually set out very clearly the open spaces and the reservations that really should be set aside for the general public, i.e. not built upon. And if we then move to part 3, the matters relating to effective town planning, we see things that the two ones that really interest me here, or rather 3. One is advertising regulation, because one of the problems they had back in those days was people just putting these big billboards advertising stuff all over the countryside, and understandably people objected to it. It didn't look very nice. So one of the things that were brought in was advertising regulations. Throughout the 1920s and 30s there was a huge amount of money actually spent on transport infrastructure, in particular roads. And one of the other things that you had to bear in mind with all of this was also how do you get the fuel for all of these motor vehicles out to the motor vehicles, and where is the best place to put them, where are the safest places to put them. Now, in again, in those days, one of the habits was to have your petrol filling stations sat right beside the roadway, so the car would just pull in, fill up, and off you go again. But obviously that creates a health and safety issue, in particular if a car crashes into said petrol station and creates a very, very big fire. So if you look at petrol stations today, and actually one thing I have noticed is that there seem to be fewer and fewer of them inside Cambridge City. If we look at what's happened over the last 50 years, one of the things that this report discusses is actually where to put them. It also discusses things like the regulation of refuse deposits and tips, like something we're still struggling with now. In fact, it's probably getting worse and worse, as we see with our struggles with all things plastic. Control of excavations again is an important one, simply because of the number of quarries we had that were being opened, and then inevitably the protection of trees and woodland.